am a London-based critical designer. My work looks at technology and politics quite broadly. And today I'm going to talk to you about smart homes. When we talk about smart homes, what we really mean is the Internet of Things, or now being called the Internet of Everything, where all objects around us become connected to the Internet and data conscious. And if you were to search for the Internet of Things or smart homes, you'd probably come across lots of really fancy images with iPads on walls, screens everywhere, batteries that last forever, and you'd probably want to start thinking about investing in window cleaner because it's probably the product we'll all need to get rid of all the finger smudges on all the screens. And the problem with that future is it's a really good design fiction because we become props for the technology rather than the technology working for us. I think we're actually building this right now. This is a really brilliant Twitter handle. I don't know who writes for it, but you should all follow it. It's rather amusing. Because the reality is at the moment that we're kind of building watches with firmware that when we have to update them mean that we fundamentally can't use what it is that they're supposed to do. We're making software that we have to update. And if that goes wrong in a lift, for instance, like on the right-hand side, the poor person that was stuck inside realized there's no buttons, because remember, in the Internet of Things, everything is a screen. And then we have images like in the middle, where we decide to connect objects and things around us that have never been connected before, probably for very good reasons. Because I wonder how, as a young person, do you grow up in a smart home connected to the Internet of Things, where even, what you do in the toilet gets recorded? How could you go out and have a drink and grow up as a person in these futures that we are deciding to buy and also to kind of exaggerate through these kind of fancy futures? We used to get products with instruction manuals. Like even I'm old enough to kind of remember that. But now we get products with apps and terms and conditions that we just have to say accept. But when we sign up to those terms and conditions, we don't just accept the strange privacy policies and terms and conditions that no one reads and understands. We sign up to these strange new social contracts. Like in the recent story about a certain brand of smart TVs, where in the privacy policy it said that anything you say in front of your TV may be recorded and sent to third parties as part of our voice recognition service. So we're moving to a future, we're building a future where the objects around us will betray us because they will gossip more than our next door neighbours. These objects, which are often kind of strange, alien-like objects that, are going to really just collect dust on your shelf, right, are really surveillance devices. They collect huge amounts of data about us. Just now, without all of us having smart thermostats and coffee makers and self-driving cars, we already create the equivalent of writing and posting 27 million tweets every day. That's before we enter this Internet of Things stage, which is supposed to improve our life and progress humanity. So we're making huge amounts of data, and as we all know in this room from the last two talks, there are big ethical problems around that to do with privacy, which I'll touch on a bit later. We also have a problem that within this smart kind of Internet of Things world, that we'll have many different objects running on different third-party proprietary software, and you get into all these kind of weird and wonderful thoughts when you start thinking about, well, how do I update the software for my pots and pans? Because that's what we're really talking about, not just phones and laptops and TVs. And none of this tech is interoperable. Nothing talks to one another. It's why my dad has so many black boxes in the living room, routers, Sonos boxes, gateways, all because the data is held in silos, but also the tech just doesn't talk to one another. And it means that we have to install third-party apps to get access and sign up to a whole new bunch of terms and conditions. I hope you can see the cycle of problems I'm starting to shape here. Security is also a huge risk in the Internet of Things. This is one of my favourite examples of a group that hacked Nest. The problem with this is that we are increasingly delegating technology to roles in our life, to things in our life that keep us alive, like keeping us warm. And this is why this is a problem. Also, as I said, each of these objects collect data, and smart thermostats know when you're in your house, when you're not in your house, how many people you live with, what your routines are. And certainly to have that information hacked makes us all very vulnerable. And of course, what the Internet of Things and smart homes are really saying is that we're all going to buy a ton more stuff. And we already know that we replace our phones every 2 years or so. Imagine when we have connected devices, stuff with chips in it, around our whole house. That's an awful lot of built-in obsolescence that at the moment is just going towards mountains of e-waste and causing quite horrific scenes like these. So I don't think the future we are moving towards right now is one that we actually want or one that's actually better than what we have now. And that's because when we talk about these smart homes, we're really talking about the extension of the internet. And that's important because the internet is increasingly becoming the biggest kind of planetary scale infrastructure for our lives. And increasingly, digital products and services are having ever greater influence on the distribution of power. Software is becoming politics. Those lines of code that control the tech that we use is having a greater influence on our lives. And in fact, as we build these technologies, what we're really doing is reinventing our citizenship. Because as the two gentlemen that came up spoke before me, policy moves so much slower than developers and designers and makers. You know, we are the individuals who are deciding what rights, powers, and capabilities the majority of us have. So in the room, I'm sure many of us are makers of one form or another, whether it's product managers, delivery managers, designers, maybe some part-time kind of coders at the weekends, or even policymakers. What we make has real impact. We're ultimately designing our citizenship, and that is why this stuff really, really matters. I'm now going to talk through a few ideas for how I think we could build better futures. I think we need to start designing for a democratic Internet of Things. And what I mean by that are objects and services that work for us as humans, as users, as soft, fleshy things that have emotions and don't operate like machines. This is a project called Little Bits, a company, sorry. They make kind of kits for tinkerers and hackers in the home. But what I think is really important about this project is that it gives individuals ownership of their data. It allows you to choose which server you store that data on, whether you want your own Raspberry Pi hooked up at home as a kind of self-made server, or if you have a personal cloud server, or if you're okay sending your information to a third-party cloud elsewhere. And I think that objects that give us choice like this are really important. Also, Internet of Things objects that deal with this idea of the future mundane, that the future's kind of already here, it's just not evenly distributed. The future might not be these kind of Apple and Microsoft visions that we see, that actually not everything should be a screen. This is a really beautiful project called Good Night Lamp. It allows you to send a lamp to one of your friends, and you kind of connect it up at home. Very, very, very simple. It runs on very simple tech for the idea that hopefully it won't fail, or it has less risk of failure. And when you get in, you can turn your lamp on just by touching the chimney, and your lamp lights up, and your friend's lamp lights up. And where this has been really popular is with international students going to university. Their mum has a lamp, they have a lamp, and they can connect from, say, Singapore to London just through these lamps, just through that little interaction. And I think you can already imagine how powerful that is for relationships. And this is something doesn't have a screen, doesn't collect lots of data, but just lets you do something you couldn't do before. And to that end, we need to empower people with what we design, with what we make. And this is a project called Project Ara. It's an open source project. There are a couple like this, and it looks at the idea of a modular phone. And obviously we can imagine more modular hardware, like modular personal home servers. What this allows you to do is to all have a common body of a phone. But for instance, for me, if most of my work is cloud-based, I probably don't need as much memory on my phone, so I could replace that memory with a better screen. Or my grandma with her phone might just want a really good speaker so she can hear me talking. She doesn't care about a fancy screen. So it allows you to customize what that technology is for you personally. And that's really empowering. Because we are all edge cases in one way or another. There is no such thing as this economic man that we design for. We are all individuals with different needs. And I think technology needs to be designed in a way that appreciates those differences. I think we can also empower people through the dark matter that sits behind technology. And this is actually my focus right now. What you're looking at now is a project I'm working on called Data Licenses. It's an idea for how we might redesign terms and conditions. It's a way that not only for us to own our own data, but also to set the rules of engagement. So we decide how our data is shared, who with, what they can do with our data, and if they could share with like-minded organizations under the same terms. This is a second iteration of questions. I'm doing a lot of user research with this to find out how people feel about sharing their data, what they understand by these questions. The question of sharing with government right now is something we're all quite confused about. Do we mean central government, local government? What model of democracy do we really believe in? But these data licenses, I think, are just one of the ways that we can design these kind of things, the invisible layers, the stacks that sit behind a technology, to really empower us. Because the Internet of Things needs rethinking. It needs redesigning. Because right now we are not headed to a future that any of us in this room, I think, probably want. It's a future that's centralized, deeply undemocratic, vulnerable, where we might have automation, but fewer of us in this room will have a job, and everything will be owned by one company. So I think we need to really think about the user needs. I think we need to unlock the potential of many decentralized technologies through thinking about what those user needs are. But also I think we need to really recognize that what we build has politics now. And as such, I think we need to design technologies that treat us not just as consumers, but also as citizens. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sarah.